Luke and Nathan, let's go live. Now we're warmed up. You know, they say the first 10, 15 minutes we stretch, get the body going, we get the vibes flowing.
Listen, let me do it. Okay, so guys, Andrew has just spent the last 20 minutes listening to me basically freak out on him. And I have to apologize to him. And while it's live and in recording, because I don't do it enough, right? I'm an old simpleton. I'm a 46-year-old idiot. I do know a little bit about cards, and I like to research things. But yesterday, I decided I was going to buy a microphone. Yes, I was going to buy a microphone. And I had it all set up, and I'm amazed by Amazon. We can get into that in a second about how I ordered something at 2 o'clock, and it was at my house at 5:30. It was pretty crazy. But anyway, we'll get to that later on. I have this microphone. I come on to record today, and I got the microphone set up, and I got these AirPods in my ears. And I'm like, hey, can you hear me? And he's like, no. And then I'm testing, and he's doing what he does because he's a multitasker, and he's responding to messages about my Jalen Hurts take. We'll also get into. And I'm like, hey, can you hear me? And he doesn't respond, which I assume is he can't hear me. But he's just head down, producer duties, 500 things. And I went about as sideways as you can go. What are you doing? I need to know if you can hear me. And you're answering the I lit this guy up. And to his credit, he just took it. He knows I'm nuts, knows I'm insane. He's like, what's the problem that we're trying to fix here? Like, about as even keel as you can get. He's like, we don't even have a problem. Why don't you just put your wired headphones in and let's record? The goal is to do a good episode. It was like I was being Tim Grovered. I legit was being Tim Grovered, and he wasn't even trying. So anyway, my apologies to you. We could have recorded this 15 minutes early if I wasn't all up in my feels about not being able to figure out how to get a microphone to work. But kudos to you, man. You got me back on track, so I appreciate it.
Dude, we have a very fiery family. The Goldbergs are very loud, very fiery. We love to debate. We love to argue. And just growing up, the Grovers, the vibes, all that, like the learnings, because I wanted to figure out our family. I was like, there's a lot of good stuff here. There's a lot of gold, but sometimes arguments can derail stuff. So
I mean, listen, look, guys, I got this. It's like you could kill somebody with this nice little microphone. Like,
it's heavy.
It's heavy. It's very heavy.
We'll go through topic by topic. First, you did a story post yesterday on housing in Phoenix. Give people the cliff notes.
The cliff notes. From Eagle's eye view, I do this from time to time to make sure that people in the hobby know they're not alone when they see their portfolio going down. Even, we took Kevin Nagandi, we took whoever it is, right? Hey, I log into Card Ladder and I see my portfolio value down, right? Like that is a common refrain from people who have been in the hobby the last couple of years. But I look at other markets. And I mean, I see, if you follow the stock market, Amazon and Google and almost all the FANG stocks, right? Not Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix was down, Google is down. I mean, all these stocks, Meta, right? So it's Facebook Meta. After hours earning report, boom, down 20%, and all of them are down big time from their highs. So I was trying to look at, different asset classes, different, things that might be, similar. And I know housing is not the same as cards, but I found this interesting, bit of research on the housing market in Phoenix, which is a particularly hot market, particularly high rising prices. And I started to do a little deep dive into why. And I found two factors in that region that I thought you could extrapolate out and move over to cards because they're similar. It was iBuying, which is like a computer fund. Zillow had this, where like they would make an offer on a house. Okay, we're making this computer buying, like a fund of money, a pool of money, buying houses, trying to buy them cheap, and then ultimately sell them. Combine that with house flipping. So you had these like fund investments, sound familiar, and flippers who were buying a house specifically for the purpose of fixing it up and reselling it. Whether they use Kurt's Card Care on it to fix it up, or if Kurt is into house care to fix it up. I don't know, what Kurt's doing these days. But point being, I saw a lot of similarities between that up market and now. And I then saw a whole bunch of articles about these iBuyers and people who are buying these houses now listing them at a loss, trying to get out with liquidity because the market has started to turn a little bit and people are starting to run, and what's going to happen with the market and you name it. And obviously, again, Eagle Eye was because I want people in the hobby to realize, if you treat this as an asset class, we should look at other asset classes that are out there, like real estate in certain markets, like Rolexes, like other things, like stocks, or they're different. They're collectibles. But if this is going to be something that is sustainable, something that is long term, it does help, I think, to look at other asset classes, see how they're moving, and see whether or not there are any similarities. I thought that there were definitely some similarities there. For a conclusion standpoint, I don't know what it means. I would imagine that there's probably going to still be a further correction because just like in the hobby, that Phoenix housing market, even though it has started to turn and even though people are now trying to sell, the price on average per square foot and median home value is still double what it was to start off 2020. Sound familiar? Same kind of bubble, same kind of pandemic, same kind of run up, you name it. So anyway, I try to do that every now and again because I got to mix it with my fart jokes that I make on my story. Also, it can't all be fart jokes all the time, right?
Well, we always think of we love on the internet. I think things become very black and white. Like, are you a collector? Are you a flipper? Are you an investor? But and are cards assets? I think it's to what degree, right? I don't think it's so black and white. I think to what degree are you a collector and to what degree are you an investor, right? You could be both. You could be a little bit of a flipper. And I think just learning from these ancillary markets, it's helpful, right? You're able to see maybe patterns and trends that you realize, oh, that's unique to cards, and oh, but this happens in every asset class. Any takeaway? Anything people who are listening could action on
from the housing market? I mean, listen, it's mostly. I would watch those things because lagging indicators. I'd see what what's going to happen with the the macroeconomic picture. Do the housing market start to stabilize? Are we going to wind up having one of these things where a trend line is, like the charts we see on card ladder? If you go out long enough, you see a pretty flat trend line, slightly going up over time. And those spikes that happen sort of just get leveled out. They're anomalies. I think that's probably what's going to happen. You want to know what I took from it? Just a little laughable thing. There are people who own houses in Phoenix before 2020. And they bought them and they were living in them. And they didn't buy them hoping for the price to double.
right?
But the price did double for whatever the reason was. The iBuyers coming in or speculators, flippers, you name it. And some of those people were able to sell and really make a lot of money on their houses. They did not buy those to make that money. They just were lucky that
Do
they
you think
were in
those people
there.
are probably rebuying at this point or in a point in the next 12 months again?
So it's possible, right? I mean, so that's the thing. You might have somebody who left Phoenix even though they planned to stay there because the price was just so high, right?
Or they're renting, right? They could just be still in Phoenix and renting.
They could be renting somewhere else. Exactly. But you would like to think that if prices continue to come down, those people who were able to sell and cash out at high prices, they're going to be like, all right, well, I'm going to come back in, right?
Something I was thinking a lot about. So my generation has never seen a recession, Gage, right? Because if you think about it, when you go to college, you don't really feel a recession. So I went to college in 2008 to 2012, which was already QE stimulus. The housing market took a hit, but it bounced back pretty quick from what I understand, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And this is our first kind of recession. And I always think about this. I've said this before. Like when we hear words, we think in photos, right? Like you hear a word and we have a photo pops up in our head or a series. And we hear recession, we think we see negative things, right? We think of people maybe not having enough money, losing jobs, their stock portfolios go down. We think of in negative terms.
Mm-hmm.
But I always like to reframe things because what if a recession isn't a negative term? Right? Like what if a down market isn't a negative term? We think of it in pictures as it is, but maybe the reality is something different. And if you go and you're able to kind of take that 180-degree look and look at something that you've historically thought of as a negative and say, wait, assets are cheaper. I'm able to buy more of the best stuff for the same amount of money. This is when wealth is made. There's maybe more opportunities because people are leaving the market, so there's less competition. You could start seeing a lot of positives to something that is historically defined as negative.
So, if you take that with the hobby, right? I think one of the things that I would tell you is that there are a lot of people who are still wondering whether this is, an asset class, an alternative asset class, something that venture capital can come in and actually make funds and make this investable and all that other fun stuff. And I think an argument can be made for the long-term health of the hobby as an investment class that a further correction is actually a good thing.
Why?
Because plotting out that chart that we talked about, that steady growth over time, a sustainable growth, not a crazy boom and burst type of growth, a sustainable growth over time is something that you can chart. It's something you can research. It's something that makes sense. It's something you can pattern. It's something you can, it's sort of like
It's predictable.
in any given year, you can pull out of the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones a year where it went up a lot or a year where it went down a lot. But because it's been trading as this, market for as long as it has, you have data that says on average the market goes up 6% per year or 7.2% per year, and it makes sense. And you can tell people if you invest in this over a length of time, you're not losing money. It's one of those things. If you just did 1 year, okay, that's our podcast, but that's just because the down one there is just this week and it's only got 1 day of numbers
Look
in
at
it. So
that.
don't read that. But yeah, our podcast is actually a very good example. It has some spikes and then boom, it's
A predictable trend line, right?
yeah, a predictable trend line. It makes something investable. I think that while there are spikes and there are peaks and valleys in the hobby, the way that it goes, right? It might actually be a good thing for the hobby long term and people in the hobby long term if that boom and bust spike. It becomes a more and more narrow thing as the picture widens. It just looks like one of these blips. But over time, that trend line looks like a normal, rational acting trend line. And I mean, take it back to the Phoenix stuff, right? I mean, these people who bought their homes, they weren't buying their homes at the time hoping to double their price. I'm sure they didn't expect the value of the home to go down. No one wants that.
Right.
When they bought it, they thought it was a smart investment. They thought, it would be a place to store their wealth, to build equity and, ultimately to own it and have an asset that they can borrow against and, raise a family or whatever it is they're doing in those homes. Most people are doing that, the ones who weren't flipping and iBuying and the whole deal. Cards were kind of like that. No, you can't raise a family in a Babe Ruth card, but you understand what I'm saying, right? It's a store of wealth. It was a collectible. It's something that, people purchased not with the hope that it was going to 10x year over year, but with the hope that hopefully it's not going to go down in value, but over time it would be a steady grower, and I think that's a more reliable, more predictable, and more, more bankable type of asset and market. Nobody wants this craziness over time. I mean, it's cool to have volatility, and people love trading that. But the only people who really invest in volatility are traders, you know. So I think maybe you need a little bit of both. Maybe.
I think what's fascinating about this is I'll leave you guys with some homework. Um, Warren Buffett has some really interesting quotes about speculation, right? And that's what this is. Speculation is the desire of buying something with the hope of someone buying it for more later.
Mhm.
Investing is buying an asset that produces, right? And it's similar but different. And Warren Buffett does an amazing job of distinguishing between the two. And he has years and years and years of him and Munger actually have years and years of countless experience that I could only hope for. I'd urge you guys to do some homework on how Buffett views speculation versus investing. He has all these like little quotes that are fun to read, and you could learn a lot from just these like bite-sized kind of chunks.
Is it the worst thing in the world if cards were producing returns like stocks? Like I ask someone like you, would you rather be able to put $10,000 into stock in Amazon and it's worth $12,000 in 2 years, or $10,000 into Kobe cards that you get to hold, look at, show off, talk about, and in 2 years it's worth $12,000? Yes, it's not worth 20 or 25, but if the thought is that you can get the same return, albeit not a 10x return, but a substantial return that matches what stocks get. But instead of buying a worthless stock certificate or just having hey, this is what I own in my Ameritrade account, you're able to hold it in your hand.
So the only issue I see with that is the predictability. Mm-hmm. Like with a stock, you kind of can be like, okay, they've exceeded earnings, because there's some. With cards, it's really difficult. You have that instinct, or you have external performance, but it's very unpredictable, right? And for just the general investment public, like what is actually a recession? It's low confidence because there's a lack of predictability of what will happen in the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only difference that I see. Like in theory, that sounds amazing, but it's hard to predict because there's so much out of your control. Yeah, I'll leave it like that. Your Jalen Hurts take. You want to clarify or talk about that a little bit?
No, I mean I like it. Look, it gets the people going. I will stand by my Jalen Hurts take from the recent episode, and my take is very similar to Aaron Judge, right? Very similar, right? When I said, hey, sell your Judge stuff now, he was in hot pursuit of, I think he was on pace for like 67 home runs when I said it, right? He had not hit 62 yet. He had not hit 61 yet. And the Yankees looked like they were going to be playing meaningful playoff games and the whole deal. When I made that, it was a calculated call, and I'll get back to Hurts in a second because it'll be exactly the same analysis. The calculated call is that, sure, there is some upside here, right? Maybe he does hit 70 home runs or 68 home runs, and maybe he goes into the playoffs and they are great and they win the World Series, right? But his cards were so high at the time that, yes, there would be some upside if he went to the World Series and he hit a monstrous amount of home runs and set the record and blew past the record. Maybe 20% more upside because they had run so much. Look at the chart. Look at the chart, how much they had run. They almost doubled, basically, in the 90 days leading up to when I said it. But what I also knew, and remember, I watch a lot of Yankee games, so I know Judge, and I've seen, what he had a great season. But I know the team, right? So I said, all right, maybe he doesn't even break the record, right? That would be ridiculous if he didn't. But it came pretty close, I mean, he beat it by one. But that's the downside, right? So what I'm doing here, it's almost like you're mapping out the potential risk and reward, right? There's some definite downside risk on those cards because maybe he doesn't break the record. All right, if he does, well then, maybe he doesn't break it by that much. Bingo. Maybe he then goes into the playoffs and doesn't play well. Maybe he goes into the playoffs and plays okay. Maybe they get eliminated early. Maybe they get eliminated after one round, after two rounds. Maybe he plays mediocre and people are still disappointed. You work that chart all the way up to the different options. Sure, then there's an option that he plays really well in the playoffs, that they win the World Series. And what I do with each one of those, it's kind of like a flow chart. All right, what's the possibility? What's the probability? And then how much is the upside to some of those possibilities and how much is the downside? And on Judge, what my thought was, my little analysis, my little along came Polly, analysis there. Ruben, right? It was.
Do you like scuba?
I like scuba. Be like the hippo, right? I mean, remember that story we talked about it all the time, right? You can't be a zebra. You gotta be a hippo. You paint stripes on yourself. You're still a hippo. So my thought was that there was a 20% chance of a 20% upside. That was what I came away with on Judge. Okay, I said 4 out of 5 were downside opportunities, right? And then with the downside, I said there was an 80% chance of a 50% downside.
And are you pulling this out of your ass, or you?
No, I can get it. No, I
right.
did. Like it's a whole map, flow chart, the whole deal. Like I had there was a 2% chance of a 80% downside if he didn't get the record and they were eliminated and swept in the first round that they played, Cleveland took them out and swept them. I did this whole deal. I did it's a little. It took me an hour, but Luke, I do that. Go ahead.
And Luca Nation, so our audience is growing, right? And we get tons of DMs all the time, and those DMs free, right? Hey, I have your question about this or this or this or this. And a lot of the themes is okay, what do you recommend? What's the right card to buy? But it's also when's the right time to sell, right? That's a question that comes up time and time again. So the clips isn't to cause a feeding frenzy and just everyone to liquidate at the same time. It's just a question when you see it over and over again, you want to help people, right? And
I
it's
mean,
that simple.
100% right. So with Hurts, it's not as clear cut because it's not with Judge. There were like a couple weeks left in the season. Hurts, I anticipate Hurts to actually have a continued good regular season run here. I mean, the NFC is not that good. I mean, Tom Brady just
We'll
got beat
talk about
again last night, and the Rams don't look like world beaters,
it.
and
Right.
Rodgers doesn't look like a world beater. I'm
Dude,
not good.
1 year ago today, people were asking to bench Hurts.
Yeah.
1 year ago, Hurts was like, hey, this guy's not going to be a quarterback. Now he's the godsend. Like, we're so recency bias, it's crazy.
It's true. But if you look at what his prices were a year ago and you look at them today, the year ago you could see that happening again. And so when you plot out that chart, right? I don't think that there is a tremendous downside in the immediate future. Like with Judge, I was like, sell now, right? Hurts, I say you could sell him now, but you have probably a little bit of a window here. That said, their stranglehold on the division is not as massive as you would think. It's not as massive as I thought it was going to be at this point in time because of the parity. I was counting on the Bucks beating a lot of teams, the Packers beating a lot of teams. I didn't think the Giants would literally be one game behind Philly, and that the Eagles would be. I mean, that the Cowboys would be right there too. You would figure an undefeated Eagles team would be running away with this division. Not so. I mean, they have two teams, nipping right at their heels.
This
And
is the Hertz chart, guys, by the way. The 85% growth over the last 3 months.
I mean, you've almost doubled your money if you were.
115% growth over the last 6 months.
And
And
I said to buy Hurts, guys. So this is
I was
not
going to
me
say,
being. Go ahead, please.
if you guys listen to the NFL season preview episode, Cage talked about how the first 9 games were easy for the Eagles, the easiest schedule. Hertz is not priced nearly as much as Burrow, Herbert, etc., and he might go 8-1, 9-0. Like, this was a prediction just 2 months ago. No, not even 6-7 weeks ago. So, if you think of our episodes or our clips not as silo one individual, but it's kind of like a book, and each podcast is a chapter, they all kind of ring true together, right?
Hurts was a clear one for me. Hurts, we talk about exits, we talk about strategies, we talk about, what are the plays and cards. Hurts was one where I gave to everyone. I don't want to buy, right? Because I don't own a Hurts card. I don't own a single Jalen Hurts card, right? When I said buy him, I didn't want to be holding. I didn't want to be buying ahead.
Correct.
I went buying with you guys because I don't want to hear any of that influencer bullshit. It was legitimately my take, which was, at the time, buy now before the season. Not because I think Hurts is a world-beating quarterback, but for two reasons. Number one, his prices were shit by comparison to Herbert and Burrow and Mac Jones even, and Trey Lance. But I said nine games in. I said, look at his first 9 games. His schedule gets a little harder in the second half of the season. I don't know what they're going to do, but it looks like a straight shot to them being the number 1 seed of the NFC East for the first half of the season. Week 9, I sell. So I gave an entrance and an exit. And it looks like between when I said that and now, you got about 50% gain overall on the Hertz index, as opposed to what Herbert is down. About a quarter, about 25%. So, but here's the fun on that, right? That's risk management too, right? You have to invest more to get a piece of Herbert, and his prices are so high that everything has to break right on Herbert for you to gain. Hurts, not so much. Like Herbert, if Herbert was having the start that Hurts has, he wouldn't be down 25%. He probably would be flat because people were expecting that. Whereas Hurts, his cards hadn't run. That's what I look for, the stuff that hasn't run. But now that it's run, you have to realize with that run, his cards are now priced the way Herbert's were in the beginning of the season. They're starting to be priced for perfection. People buying it now are expecting him to win the division and have a meaningful run in the playoffs. And that may happen, and those people might make 20% from what you sell it to them now. But that's a might. Capitalize on the fact that there is still that potential out there, and because of that potential, there are still people who are willing to buy at your peak price now on the hope to make 20% and be able to flash their Hertz cards on Instagram during the playoff run that they think is going to happen. Because if you hold, right, sure, you don't make that extra 20%. If you hold, you could make that extra 20%, but what if he gets eliminated? What if he starts losing? What if he gets hurt? I'm knocking on wood. I don't want him to get hurt. I never root anybody hurt, but that's part of the equation as well. Then now you didn't buy at this, let's call it peak. You missed out on a potential 20%, but if you sell now, you're also missing out on all of my flow chart of the potential bad things, that Dallas catches him, that the Giants catch him, that he hurts his knee. Hurts gets hurts. I was doing it all last year, right? Or that it just doesn't break right. It's football. Last year, Joe Burrow was not the best quarterback in the AFC. Mahomes was better. You could make an argument Herbert was better. You can make an argument Derek Carr was better. Josh Allen clearly was better, right? I mean, you have all these quarterbacks in the AFC, but it was Burrow who went to the Super Bowl. Sometimes the guy who's the best and the team that may not be the best is not the team that catches fire, gets momentum at the right time. It's football.
Do you think we sometimes get distracted in this game that we look at the player name versus understanding that it's not about the player, it's about the risk reward? Or the
yes. A lot of that is I want to be right, like, and I want to be first.
Like, it's not about Hurts or it's just upside downside risk, right? And we understand that when it comes to stocks, right? Okay, Tesla's run up so much, it probably has more of a chance to go down than up, like in a very basic, simple scenario. But here, where we price in like Super Bowls and performance, because it's players, we get a little bit more emotionally attached, and we're like, no, he's going to go all the way type of thing.
We're humans. Remember, we're fans, right? I do not know a single person who 8 years ago would openly admit to being a Houston Astros fan. There was no one.
They're terrible.
I did not know a single Houston Astros fan. Seriously. But if you ask today, all of them have been Astros fans for the whole time. Decade ago, yeah, me and my grandfather used to watch the Astros on the weekends. And we used to dress like astronauts.
Jeff Bagwell, amazing.
I mean, come on, Bagwell was the best. I mean, I've been a
Looks like he's
Astros
taking
fan forever. But now, the Astros bandwagon. Now you got influencers out there who are the biggest Astros fans. And people who live in New York suddenly are Astros fans. I mean, I don't know why, but they are. They're Astros fans. I'll tell you why. Because human nature, people want to get on a bandwagon. Right? People want to jump on a bandwagon because it's no fun to be a fan of a team that loses. It was no fun to be a Yankee fan this week. It was probably no fun to be a Guardians fan last week, right? It was no fun to be a Seattle fan. You can tell yourself it was because, wow, we're going to be great next year. But the best group to be with is the one that ultimately wins. And
because either we win or we fight.
I mean, listen, Philly may win. But it's exactly the same scenario. People are all over Herbert at the beginning of the year because Herbert is the Astros. There's a lot of people in that camp. There's a lot of front runners in that camp, and they all want to party together. They all want to, bang that garbage can. Sorry, I had to do it. They all want to, they all want to be beating to the same garbage can. So
about this phenomenon that I keep seeing.
Nobody wants to be on the little guy. Nobody wants to be on the underdog until the underdog wins, and then all of a sudden they all jump on the underdog, and it's too late. Nobody wanted to invest in Bryce Harper until now. Now everybody wants to be on Bryce Harper. It's too late.
So a year ago, maybe just a little bit over a year ago, it was like unanimous. Brady's the greatest ever.
Yep.
Not even like it was like 95 people out of 100 you ask, which in sports would say that, would agree to that. Now we're seeing ESPN analysts come out and say that Brady isn't the greatest.
Well, who are they saying is?
Well, so why do we do this with culture? We see this with Russell Wilson. We love to build somebody up and then tear them down. And I'm like sitting here thinking, you guys think 8 games and a divorce is what's going to be what's going to hurt Brady's legacy? No, it's going to have zero effect.
Ultimately, in the long run, it will have zero effect, right? Because things get, it's amazing. I don't want to end the episode now, but it would be a great way to do it because it all goes back to investability, predictability, bankability, and human nature over trend lines. And the longer the trend line and the longer you're able to zoom out, whether it's the Phoenix housing market or Tom Brady's investability and his goatness in the mind of investors and fans. In the moment, a bubble looks like it's going to burst and never stop going down. In the moment, Amazon's stock in after hours down 20% looks like the chart is just going to continue to go like this. In the moment, Meta crash looks like that. In the moment, right now, Tom Brady's world is crashing around him. He looks like he hasn't eaten in 3 months. His wife, is leaving him or whatever, getting divorced. The team can't catch balls. He all of a sudden can't throw a pass. And in this moment, he's not that good. He's not the GOAT anymore. But whether he wins this year, doesn't win this year, when he retires in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years, people will look back and say, okay, this particular season was a blip. At the time, it was this huge crash in the chart. But when you look back at the body of work and the 2 decades that he did it, you'll see that this was greatness throughout the entire time. We kind of sometimes get lost in these things. It's one of the things that doesn't happen in vintage, right? We get lost in these.
It's the most shocking thing. Brady is vintage.
Yeah,
Brady's been playing for 20 years and has.
But you know what? What's funny is if we're allowed to just shine a light on ourselves. I mean, I'll admit to my weaknesses as much as I can, right? And
7 Super Bowl wins, guys.
Just wait for it. Wait for it. I go off on tangents and I don't shut up. But how can you sit there and say that we are ridiculous for doing this? ESPN is ridiculous for calling out the greatness of Tom Brady. When his team is just not catching the ball and not doing that stuff, but at the same time, be a little less tolerant, a little more critical of someone like LeBron.
Compare those two for me.
LeBron's also been playing at a great level for 20 years. He's also won, 6 championships now? Well, no, he won four championships, right? 5 championships. 5. That's right. I forget the bubble one. I never count the bubble one. 5 championships. So he doesn't have the 7, right? One late in his career to add on, like Brady just had on a different team. He's going to hold.
That's 4 championships.
I said 4. I said 4 and 6. So you said 4 and 6. So 4 and 6 in the finals. Been to the finals 10 times. Took Cleveland to the finals in the East. Won the East like a million times. I'm not a huge LeBron fan. I find myself defending him. I don't even know how many titles he has. But I guess what I'm saying is right now, just like it's easy for people to kind of come down on Brady and say, wow, he's not the GOAT. He's people are also doing that, yourself included, to LeBron. But I think when his body of work is over, it becomes a different analysis. We look at what he did. We look at that his numbers were great, even though probably the first half of his career he wasn't playing in what I would call like a shooter's time. Now you have these 3-point shooting, you have the whole deal. His numbers would be even probably more gaudy. If he played in a different time where maybe he would have learned to shoot 3 better. I don't know. But over time, I think, right now it's easy to attack him. He's at the tail end of his career. It's not going well. He's putting cryptic messages out there on Instagram.
What did he say?
I don't know, something about like how long does he have to tolerate this for? Like he's an interesting cat. He'll take the high road when they interview him about it later and say, he's trying to motivate or whatever it is. But, I guess all these guys have different ways of motivating. If it was practice and Kobe was there, he'd be on Russ every practice until Russ just stops shooting threes. He would make sure that he beat him down until that's not you, just stop doing it. LeBron's not that guy. He's not getting, confrontation. He's not doing it.
Yeah, Brady throws the tablet and yells at his offensive line. Some people like that and say it's competitive. Some people are like he's a dick as a teammate.
Exactly. But I think my point here is just, we get lost in this in the moment, right? And because LeBron is still playing, there is some potential upside baked into his cards, into his value, you name it. And same thing with Brady. He could still win. Like in the beginning of the year, I think I might have even said Brady's going to go out there and not care about wins, but he's just going to throw as many touchdowns as he can because now it's like personal record stuff. Well, he can't. I mean, they're not scoring touchdowns at all. So it's
a great comparison. I think what you're seeing with the Lakers and what you're seeing with the Bucks, I think there's a ton of parallels I could make. And I love Brady and I hate LeBron, and even I have to say that. I'll tell you guys one thing I'm doing, and we often solve for demand, but we forget about supply. it's a great time to buy Brady, not just because all of the aforementioned reasons, but because of how much supply is hitting the market. So, unlike LeBron, who might have had his cards graded a year and a half ago, there are so many PSA 10 and 9 numbered colored refractors from the Topps Chrome set, patches, beautiful cards hitting PWCC Weekly and eBay every single week to the point where I don't think that the demand is going to be able to keep up. And if you believe in some of this stuff, you're able to get some amazing, amazing cards for, I mean, whatever your price range is, you're able to get amazing deals.
By the way, Brady is a great thing for the hobby because he's been around for such a long time. LeBron, too. They would be the Phoenix housing market, right? Because there are people who bought Brady in 03, 04, 05, 06 because they were Brady fans. And they bought those cards because they were up in New England. I mean, I talked about this, by the way, with Mike Gio yesterday on Sports Card Nonsense. And he's, we would talk about like what you could invest in and the whole deal and you put it against stuff. And he's like, I would venture to say I put my Brady up against stuff because I bought it in 2004, that it's fine. It wasn't the intention of it, but, it's doing great. It's the same exact thing. But if you look at Brady's cards over the last 2 years, a lot of people who bought them are not New Englanders who bought Brady because he was a GOAT and gave them all these moments of championships and parades and all this stuff, that they were just keeping a Brady card because they needed to have a Brady next to their bed when they woke up, in the morning and started their day. They got to look at Tom Terrific. No, the majority of people who were buying Brady over the last were buying because they were supposed to buy GOATs. They're buying because they were looking to flip it. They're buying because they wanted to catch, Brady going up and think that they could buy now and sell it for more money. And you're right. I think that the supply is now hitting, and the demand for Brady, especially in a year like this where the wheels are sort of coming off, that ancillary demand is not there. But if you happen to be somebody who's been in the Phoenix market since '04 and there's a card there, you can wait for it to come down to your price range and add a card now because the prices are coming down. I think it's it's a great it's a great piece of analysis you're doing. And yeah, I mean, look, the Topps Chrome stuff, there's no shortage of that. The guy's been playing forever. I mean, there's plenty of like refractors and color cards and the whole deal.
I know, but they say like there's a time when like you can't get cards for kids cheap, right? Like there's that whole thing. Well, just 2 weeks ago, I bought maybe 50 Brady Chrome PSA 10s, Topps finest, 30-40 bucks.
I'm pretty sure you can go on Walmart.com right now and get Prism basketball. You want to do a little test?
I'd rather a PSA 10 Brady.
I know, but we're in a different spot, is all I'm saying, right? So I think I'd rather a PSA 10 Brady too. But that was not something that was a sentence. Like if you posted, "Oh, Walmart's got this," it's gone. Like the bots were getting it. Now I guess the bots moved on to Funko. I don't know what they moved on to, but they moved on to something else. And they're not like attacking the Walmart site every time. The price is up a little bit. Blasters
There's
used to
nothing
be
in the packs. That's the issue. There's nothing good.
They've made too much of it. They've made too much.
I'll wrap with this, guys. We put out clips, and thank you for our content team. Their clips, and because we realize not all of you. We realize not all you guys can listen to an hour episode. So click clip here, clip here. Something to keep in mind, and this is one of my favorite things about the hobby, is like the people that comment that would be like, Jalen or sell Jalen Hurts now, awful take. And you go and you click on their profile and it's like Jalen Hurts, #1 fan page, or half their stuff is Jalen Hurts. So remember people who have vested interest versus people who are trying to help.
I want people to say it's a bad take.
Sure.
Because that means they are a fan. I got a couple messages and people are like, I'm a huge Jalen Hurts fan. I'm starting to take some money off the table. And by the way, if you're a Jalen Hurts #1 fan, there's nothing wrong with balancing it out that way, right? Like you're probably in the profit. If you are the Jalen Hurts #1 fan page or just somebody who was smart enough to buy Jalen Hurts before the season started, there's nothing wrong with keeping some and selling some. There's nothing wrong with locking in some profits. I guarantee if you message any of your friends, because I'm sure you don't just surround yourself with Jalen Hurts fans, right? I'm sure if you message any of your friends, the guys who were investing in Herbert, in Mac Jones, in Trey Lance, even in Joe Burrow, in anyone, in Tom Brady, message any of those guys and say, hey, when they were at their last season or the season before, when they were at their peak, Do you wish you would have sold a couple of them, locked in some profit, and just rode out a bunch of your other ones all on profit? Every one of them is going to tell you yes. It's just hard to take the emotion out from the equation when you're doing it. But in hindsight, I guarantee every one of them will tell you now. If it's me, do it. Again, nothing wrong with it. There is a guy, I read an article about a guy who bet the Astros were going to beat the Phillies in the World Series and bet it like in the beginning of the season. And I don't know what it pays. It's like a $500 bet that pays like $1 million or something like that. And he's like, I'm not hedging. I don't care what anyone tells me. I'm not hedging. The hell with that. Meanwhile, he bet Houston to beat Philly. It's like the perfect hedge scenario because Philly's getting like plus 185 on the series. Like you could figure out a way to like guarantee $500,000. But there are people who are like, I'm not doing it. I've come this far. I bet on what I bet on. The whole
Not how it
deal.
works.
That's
Not how it works.
gambling, though. There's a way
Yeah.
to take the gamble out of the equation and still win. Sure, you don't win as much. Sure, you're taking some of that money off the table, but you're also taking off the loss, taking off the potential for a
My
loss.
greatest call of all time, was living in SF, and I put in a futures bet of the Giants to win the World Series and the Royals to win the World Series, like in August, and both of them were good money, and they both met up. So I didn't have to hedge, but I thought I was such a genius. But that's actually the issue, by the way. Buffett talks about that. Like when you're right, you think you're a genius. When you're wrong, you think you're an idiot. But the reality is, none of that even matters. That's all feelings and emotions. The goal is to profit. Well, actually, the goal is not to go out of business, if I could be honest, and then profit, right? Rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, look at rule number 1.
Right, steal underpants.
No, that's
So,
not
so I guess the add-on, the second part to the thing is, for all you guys saying it's a bad take, I'm hoping Jalen Hurts wins the Super Bowl. I am. I'm hoping he wins the Super Bowl.
But we've seen Mahomes win a Super Bowl, and his prices go down after it. So
I'm not rooting against Hurts. I'm not rooting against Hurts. I'm just saying at this point in time, if you look at the data and you look at how much his cards have run, the potential for upside in there is significantly outweighed by the potential for downside at the prices they currently are. It really has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts or the Eagles or your fandom.
Cage.
It is all charts. Yeah.
If you were to guess Steph Curry's card ladder index over the last 3 months, what do you think it would be?
Slightly up to flat. Curry's
down 30%.
Cards. I mean, that's pretty nuts.
It happens every time in every sport, and not just
Curry's down 30%.
I'll pull it up for you guys.
That's insane.
Because it happens all the time. I'll explain. And you guys that are on weekly religiously, you know this. So here, down over the last 3 months, from July 29th to now, down 29%. And
all right, but most of that is in the most of that is at the end of the.
No, 6 months. Cage, 6 months. From May 1st to today, down 36%. And I'll explain why. Because we get so caught up in demand and performance, we don't solve for the supply. And when a player wins, a lot of his supply hits the market. And it has this anchor effect.
Well, I would say that makes sense, right? I mean, you're talking about
and
the
that's Curry.
Thing. And
who
also
won 4th championship, unpredictable championship, whose team is poised to win another championship.
In general, market there too. I would expect up recently, just because I would have thought after the championship it would go down, and then we'd start to see it climb back up. Now, as the season
has nothing to do with that, though, Cage. Yeah. There's so many of his cards hitting weekly. I read you the stats. Yeah. Curry was the number 1 buy supply across from $5 all the way up into the 10 and 20,000, because so much of it came out and people were selling. It has. I think
what it comes down to is, especially with these modern, like the quarterbacks and stuff, if that's the game you're going to play and you're going to be gambling, because that's what it is, if you happen to hit on a winner, cash it out before it becomes a loser. That's my take, right? And you didn't really get a chance to do that with Trey Lance. Right, everybody invested in Lance. He had the rain games, and he was injured, and that was a loser before it could ever be.
I'll give you guys some context. There's an XRC Gold sold for $30K, just got reran maybe a week and a half ago, sold for $7,800, $22,000 loss in 2 months.
Hurts is a huge winner right now, one of the few winners out there. You know what I'd be curious about? What's
Still
Josh
hurts and
Allen's?
buying Mac Jones.
What's Josh Allen's chart look like? Because that guy's done everything right. And by the way, just so that you don't think I'm picking on Hurts, I would probably be selling Josh Allen now too.
Well, this is what I hate, because when you bring up players' names, people get emotionally attached, but it has nothing to do with Hurts or Allen or anybody specific.
It's just the price of the card. It's
just the price of the card.
And there's
Allen's up 17% over the last 6 months, according to Card Ladder.
That's at a time where everything else is down. So part of the Curry thing I forgive is because the market's probably down 30%, so he's down 30%, so he's basically flat. Allen has managed to buck a general overall downtrend in the market and be up, right? I mean,
but let's think about why that is, by the way. He's flat over 3 months. The reason why he's flat is even in a down market, people don't want to sell him. So there's not as much supply hitting the market.
Yep. Well, I mean, what I would say is I'll be wrong about somebody, right? Someone's going to win the Super Bowl, right? Someone's going to win the Super Bowl. I don't know who it's going to be, but I'll be right about the other 8 guys. Because I give a Jalen Hurts take, I just give a Josh Allen take. If I give a sell your Justin, if I sell your Mahomes cards right now, Andrew's going to go crazy and say he's the best in the world.
What do you think Mahomes' chart is over the last 6 months?
Also down.
How much?
30%. Like Curry. Yeah, I mean, listen, it makes sense.
Look at this drop.
Well, the drop there is the Allen drop. That's the beginning of the season where
I think this is his gold vinyl, because I think the gold vinyl had a big
impact,
big weight on Card Ladder, and that gold vinyl that sold I think it was Premier went from like 350,000 to like 150.
I mean, the point here is that I'm never going to come on here and say that Patrick Mahomes is not a good quarterback. I'm going to say he's a great quarterback. Could be potentially the quarterback of this generation. But 6 months ago, I was telling Andrew to sell Patrick Mahomes, and he was saying, no, he's a buy right now.
I didn't buy Patrick. I started buying Patrick Mahomes at and I think if I'm holding a bag of Hurts, if I'm holding a bag of Hurts and I want to take profit, I'm looking at no further than a Mahomes right there. You got this generation's quarterback, in my opinion.
Now, so people will ask, well, who are you buying? Right? I mean,
if you want the performance run up, you have someone who's already down 50% over the last 6 months, equally poised to make a run. That feels like it has as much upside as it has more upside than downside, back to like the risk reward.
Yeah.
And I have Mahomes.
You would like to think long term,
I own Mahomes.
A better floor there, because he's already won the MVP and he's already won a Super Bowl, right? So
So 50% down, what does it go down anymore? So that's another episode. Any final words before you want to take us home with?
No, I mean, listen, don't kill me over the Hurts take. Hurts is great. I love that you're a fan. It's less about, the player themselves and more about just overall charts, overall risk reward. And my hope, guys, is that as the market stabilizes, that there'll be more opportunity for buying. And the reason for that is because everybody got so far ahead of themselves on the pricing of some of these guys. There was only one way for it to go, right? So if you happen to be a fan of Trevor Lawrence, when his team finishes, 6-11 this year, right? There'll probably be an opportunity for you to buy Trevor Lawrence in the offseason at significant discounts to what everybody was buying him at. If that's your guy, go ahead and have that be your guy. Find the point to get in and buy in. There will be opportunities to get in on these guys.
Brady, what do you think Brady's down over 3 months?
Wow. I think he's probably mirroring Mahomes, and probably recent also off the clip as well. Because, like I said, people who thought there might be a run in him are now saying, there's no run and there's more supply coming out. So I would say he probably matches Mahomes.
For sure.
And I would bet Rodgers is probably similar too.
Yeah. I don't rate Rodgers really high, by the way. That's just my opinion. He reminds me of Reggie Jackson a little bit.
Okay. All right. Personality issues and the whole deal.
LeBron down 13%. I think a part of that is people are still holding with like the record in mind a little bit.
Yep.
A little concerning, by the way, for me, because I do think there's another 20-30%, and that's against my own interest because I have a little bit of LeBron in there. Anyway, 50 minutes in. That's your episode. Tomorrow's PWCC Weekly. Sunday, whatnot. Cage is catching his groove. If you want to make money in gambling, and that's your thing, prop bets and stuff, join us 11 a.m. Eastern Sunday mornings. a ton of amazing feedback about the Nagandi episode.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to that
Nagandi
yet,
on.
listen.
Honestly,
good
met
guy.
him at National. Met him at National in Chicago. Went to an awesome dinner together, and then went to like a happy hour thing post. So awesome guy, super down to earth. Like he never super down to earth. So
I want to root for Philly to win for him and his family. That's the kind of guy it is. I left that episode saying, I hope Philly gets a split. I also don't like Houston, so it doesn't make it that. It makes it easy for me also to root for Philly. Gotta love it.
I don't know. More people don't want to root for Philly. It's a great city. I don't know what I don't.
Is it a shithole?
The whole like Santa Claus and throwing batteries at him. It's like, okay, maybe wrong in the moment, but right in the entirety. And you know,
I mean, Philly, even when something's broken, they don't throw it away. That's what I'll say about Philly. I give you guys credit. I mean, you got this ugly ass bell with a crack in it, and you've been saving it for hundreds of years. I mean, you don't throw stuff away even when
that's
it's
our
broken.
only tourist attractions. That and artificial cheese. That's with this. They add yellow to it. Like they add so much yellow food coloring to it. It's shocking.
So thank you all for listening to another episode of Lucas, Tigers, and Bronzo Mai. I wanted to tell you about a new service that we have starting as of today, and I'm really, really excited to bring it to you guys. So as a part of our partnership with SGC, we got 50 free submissions every single month, and many of you have taken advantage of that. And it's amazing that we could have the opportunity to 650 episodes, 675 episodes in, to go ahead and give back to our community. As people were sending those cards in, they asked, can we send 5, 10, 20 more cards to you guys? We'll pay for it, but we wanted them graded with SGC. You guys know SGC is turning cards around in 13 to 14 business days, have incredible customer service, and their secondary market values are going up day after day after day. And that's exciting for the hobby and exciting for the grading landscape. So we didn't want to just rush into it. We wanted to do it right. And what we did was I relocated here to Boca Raton, Florida. I opened up a P.O. box maybe 5 minutes away from SGC, and I will be hand delivering and hand picking up the cards. So you don't have to worry about anyone else touching your cards. It will be me, and I will update you every step of the way. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to personally pick up the cards from a P.O. box, prep them, new card saver, new penny sleeve, and deliver them to SGC every single Tuesday. Why Tuesday? Well, it lets the stragglers over the weekend come back through on Monday and gives me a day to prep, and it basically gives SGC the entire week to work on grading those cards. Once your cards pop, only then at the end of the process will you be paying for the service. It's $25 per card, simple as that, and the turnaround times have never been faster. We're hearing right now 13, 14, less than 20 business days. So there it is. 9170 Glades Road, number 135 is the P.O. Box in Boca Raton, Florida, 33434. 9170 Glades Road, number 135, Boca Raton, Florida, 33434. Of course, you could shoot me an email or shoot me a text anytime, and I'm always available. Many of you already have my email. It's iamandrewgoldberg@gmail.com. or my cell phone number, 215-519-9154. Reach out with any questions. I could walk you through the process. I've hopped on the call with quite a few of you, and I'm happy to do that. Love you, Luca Nation.